I never thought a cul-de-sac could feel like a battlefield. But that morning, standing in the rising Texas heat, I could feel the tension ripple through the air like the shimmer off hot asphalt. The hum of cicadas mixed with the rumble of my old Ford truck as I parked at the edge of Maple Ridge Estates, the kind of place where the grass was always cut at exactly 3 inches, and the residents smiled with their teeth but not their eyes. I wasn't one of them. Not anymore. My name's Ethan Cole, and about 6 months ago, I inherited a piece of land from my late father. 40 acres of undeveloped scrub oak and limestone just beyond the edge of the Maple Ridge HOA. It used to be part of the old ranch before the developers carved it up and sold off the neighborhood lots. Most of the folks living there didn't even know the dirt. Road that led into the back of my property wasn't theirs. That changed the day I tried to drive through. I was hauling lumber for a small cabin I'd been building. My way of honoring my dad. The old access road was the most direct route, running between 2 rows of HOA homes before cutting off into my land. I'd used it as a kid. My dad had used it before me. It wasn't fancy, just gravel, weeds, and memory. But as I eased the truck forward that morning, a white SUV came barreling toward me. It stopped dead center of the road, blocking my way. Out stepped a woman in a floral blouse, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge. Karen Holt, president of the Maple Ridge HOA. Her lips pursed as she looked at me like I'd tracked mud across her marble floor. "Sir, this is private property," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "You're trespassing in a residential area." I blinked. "I'm just heading to my land out back. My family's property. Been using this road for decades." She glanced down at her clipboard, then back up. "This is part of the Maple Ridge community. If you don't live here, you can't use our road." "Our road?" I couldn't help the laugh that escaped. "Ma'am, I think you've got that backward." She crossed her arms, unfazed. "I'm the HOA president. I know exactly where our boundaries are." That was the moment something in me shifted, a slow burn lighting somewhere deep in my chest. I could have driven around, taken the long route from the county highway, but something about the way she said our, like she owned the world and everyone in it, made me stop. I kept my tone calm. "Karen, right? Maybe we should both double-check those boundaries before you accuse me of trespassing." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You can take that up with our board. Until then, this road is off limits. I'm calling security, for a gravel road that my father had graded with his own hands." She took out her phone and started snapping pictures of my truck like she was documenting a crime scene. I turned off the engine and leaned against the hood, watching her, silent. The heat shimmered between us, carrying the faint scent of asphalt and arrogance. "Go ahead," I said finally. "Call whoever you need." By the time the local deputy arrived, half the neighborhood had gathered. Men in polos, women in yoga pants, all whispering like they were watching a reality show unfold in their cul-de-sac. Deputy Ray Henson stepped out of his cruiser, giving me a look that said he already knew this was nonsense but had to play along. "Mornin', Ethan," he said. "Got a call about a trespasser." I raised an eyebrow. "Guess that'd be me." Karen was quick to interject. "He's been driving through HOA property without permission." "I've warned him before," Ray sighed. "You've warned him before?" Karen nodded eagerly. "Multiple times." I could see Ray's jaw tighten. He looked at me. "Ethan, you got proof this is your access road?" "Better," I said, reaching into the glove box and pulling out an old manila folder. Inside were copies of the land deeds, the ones my dad had kept pristine. I handed them over. Ray scanned the pages, then turned one around toward Karen. "Looks like this road falls on his property line." "Actually..." He squinted closer. "It's entirely within the Cole Ranch parcel." Karen blinked. "That can't be right." "Our HOA documents..." "Ma'am," Ray interrupted, polite but firm. "County records trump HOA paperwork. This road isn't yours." The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Karen's face went from red to pale in seconds. "That's impossible," she muttered. The developer said. I stepped forward just enough for her to hear the edge in my voice. "Developers say a lot of things, Karen. My dad never sold the easement." She looked at me like the world had just tilted beneath her feet. "You can't expect us to believe that." "You don't have to believe it," I said. "You can look it up yourself." Ray handed me back the papers with a small nod. "You're good to go, Ethan." As I drove past her, I caught a glimpse of Karen's reflection in my mirror. Stiff posture, eyes wide with disbelief. But what I didn't realize then was that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. 2 days later, I got a certified letter taped to my mailbox. Notice of violation. Unauthorized entry and destruction of community property. It was from the HOA, signed by Karen Holt herself. They claimed my truck had damaged association-maintained gravel and that I owed $675 in fines. I almost laughed, until I realized she was serious. That evening, I drove back to the road, parked my truck, and stood there under the fading orange light. Crickets sang in the brush and the houses glowed with porch lights and entitlement. I looked down at the gravel, the same gravel my father had laid, the same path that had existed long before Maple Ridge was a subdivision. A slow smile spread across my face. If Karen wanted a war over land lines, she was about to find out who really owned the battlefield. The morning after that letter, I sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee and a growing sense that things were about to get messy. The envelope still lay open beside me, the words destruction of community property stamped in bold across the top like a dare. I kept reading it over, trying to decide if Karen was stupid, desperate, or both. Probably both. The sun was barely over the trees when I made my first call, to the county land records office. Yeah, I said, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. I need confirmation on parcel lines for property 47B, Cole Ranch Northern Section. Specifically, the easement and road usage rights. The woman on the other end paused. You're talking about the old ranch road, right? That's the one. Give me a second. I heard the faint clicking of keys, the shuffle of papers. Then she let out a low whistle. Well, this is interesting. According to our survey, that access road doesn't belong to the HOA at all. It's fully contained within your parcel. No public easements recorded, which means it's mine, I finished. Exactly. I thanked her, hung up, and felt that same slow satisfaction building in my chest. But I wasn't done. I needed proof, something undeniable. That afternoon I called Tom Grady, an old friend of my father's and one of the best independent surveyors in the county. Tom was a man who trusted paper maps more than GPS and had the kind of calm drawl that could disarm a rattlesnake. Ethan Cole, he said when I called. Haven't heard that name in a while. How's the old ranch holding up? Still standing, I said. But I've got a situation. Some HOA's claiming my access road is theirs. He chuckled. One of those. I'll be out there tomorrow morning. Bring coffee, 2 sugars, 1 cream. The next day, Tom showed up in his dusty Chevy with a tripod and a weathered canvas map tube. The air was thick with heat and tension as we stood on the gravel road, staring down the stretch that cut between Maple Ridge's perfect lawns. Karen appeared before long. Of course she did. She came striding down the sidewalk, phone in hand, wearing a sun visor and that same smug authority. Behind her, 2 HOA board members followed like backup dancers in a bad performance. What's going on here? She demanded. Tom didn't even look up from his equipment. Morning, ma'am. Just running a property line verification for Mr. Cole. Karen frowned. There's no need for that. The HOA has already confirmed this road is part of our community infrastructure. Tom smiled slightly, still adjusting his transit level. Well, ma'am, if that were true, the county would have record of an easement transfer. They don't. Her expression flickered, but she recovered fast. The developer assured us. Tom cut her off gently. Developers assure a lot of things. The land says otherwise. He turned the instrument toward her and peered through it. You see that marker? He asked, pointing toward a rusted iron stake half buried at the base of a mesquite tree. That's the original boundary, driven into the ground in 1962. Everything past that stake is Cole Ranch property. Karen looked like she'd swallowed glass. That's impossible, she whispered. Tom shrugged. The earth doesn't lie, ma'am. 2 hours later, Tom packed up his gear and handed me a freshly printed survey report from the back of his truck. This'll shut them up, he said, grinning. You've got full ownership. No shared access, no easement, nothing. That road is yours outright. I paid him in cash and a handshake. Then walked the length of the gravel path again, the paper warm in my hand. For a moment, I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. That evening, my phone started lighting up with missed calls, numbers I didn't recognize. Then came the emails. Cease and desist. Violation of HOA Code 14.3. Pending civil action notice. Karen was doubling down. She'd rallied the HOA board and sent a barrage of threats, fines, and legal jargon. They even claimed I was endangering residents by driving through community space. It was absurd, but also dangerous. HOAs thrived on intimidation, on making people too exhausted or broke to fight back. Most folks would have folded, but I wasn't most folks that night. I pulled out my father's old records, dusty boxes filled with deeds, tax receipts, letters from the original developer back in the 80s. And there it was, tucked between two faded envelopes, a 1979 right-of-way map stamped with the developer's signature, acknowledging the Cole family's retained ownership of the access road in perpetuity. That was the nail in the coffin. I scanned every page, then drove to the county assessor's office first thing the next morning. I filed copies, notarized the documents, and requested public confirmation of my ownership to be added to the county's digital registry. When I left the office, I felt lighter, vindicated, but I wasn't done yet. By the end of the week, I'd erected 2 new signs at the entrance to the road: private property, Cole Ranch access only. Trespassers will be prosecuted, and beneath that, in smaller letters, not part of Maple Ridge. The signs gleamed in the afternoon sun like twin daggers stuck in the HOA's pride. By sundown, Karen showed up again, this time furious enough to tremble. "You can't just put those up," she snapped. "You're blocking residents' access." "To what?" I asked. "My land?" She glared at the signs. "This road has always been part of our neighborhood." "Not anymore," I said. "Actually, not ever," her voice cracked. "You'll regret this, Mr. Cole. The HOA will take this to court." "Good," I said quietly. "Then maybe a judge can explain the word ownership to you." She stormed off, phone pressed to her ear, already calling her lawyer. I watched her go, that same slow burn of anger and satisfaction coiling inside me. She didn't understand yet. She thought this was still a neighborhood dispute. But I'd seen the documents, the history, the truth, and when the law got involved, the HOA wouldn't just lose the road, they'd lose everything tied to it. 3 weeks later, the first cracks appeared. Karen's HOA attorney sent me a final warning, a sloppy, templated document that didn't even match the county's registered parcel numbers. I responded with certified copies of the official survey, the 1979 developer's acknowledgement, and a statement from the county clerk verifying my ownership. 2 days later, I received silence. Then the whispers began. Neighbors started asking questions at HOA meetings. Why were their fees going up? Why did the HOA lose jurisdiction over the access road? By the time the next newsletter came out, half the residents were demanding a financial audit. Karen tried to spin it, claiming administrative errors. But the more she spoke, the deeper she sank. I just watched from my porch each evening, sipping my coffee, listening to the faint echoes of chaos drifting down the road that wasn't theirs, the road that never was. And as the summer heat deepened and the HOA's walls began to crack, I couldn't help but wonder, how far would Karen go before the truth buried her? Because something told me she wasn't done yet. Not until she lost everything. By August, the Texas heat was so thick you could almost hear it hum. The air hung heavy over Maple Ridge, and the perfect lawns that once glistened like emeralds were starting to brown at the edges, the first signs of neglect. From my porch, I watched the neighborhood unravel piece by piece. The HOA meetings had turned from potlucks into shouting matches. Residents stood on their driveways in little knots, gossiping, pointing fingers, wondering why their association dues had doubled in a single month. Karen Holt still made her rounds, clipboard in hand, chin high, but the mask had slipped. Her steps had grown tight and defensive, her smile brittle. Word had spread that the HOA had spent nearly $40,000 in legal fees trying to prove they owned my road, and they'd lost. Officially, I'd received the final court ruling 2 weeks prior. The judge's signature was still crisp on the page, the ink dark and decisive. The court finds that the roadway in dispute lies entirely within the Cole Ranch property, held under clear and continuous title since 1979. The Maple Ridge Homeowners Association has no authority, claim, or jurisdiction over said roadway. That single paragraph had done what months of arguing couldn't. It killed the HOA's illusion of power. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet, because Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. It started small. Trash dumped near the edge of my land, tire roots carved through the gravel, signs knocked down overnight. Petty things. Childish. Then came the noise. Complaints. Anonymous calls to the sheriff, claiming I was hosting illegal construction activity. Ray Henson stopped by twice that week, his cruiser kicking up dust as he pulled in. "Ethan," he said with a sigh, "I know it's her, but I've got to respond when dispatch sends me." "I get it," I said. "Do what you need to. I'll handle the rest." He nodded, tipping his hat. "Careful. Folks like her don't back down easy. They implode." He was right. A few days later, I got an email from a man named Patrick Greer, a resident from Maple Ridge. "Mr. Cole, I know we've never spoken, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for how our HOAs treated you. A bunch of us are tired of Karen's lies. She told everyone you were suing the community, said you were trying to take over the neighborhood. We checked the county records ourselves. You were right all along. If you ever need statements from residents, we'll back you." That message, polite, hesitant, genuine, was the first crack of sunlight through months of tension, and it gave me an idea. The next morning, I drove into town and met with a friend at the county planning office, a woman named Janice Porter. She'd helped my father decades ago when the developers first started sniffing around the ranch. When I told her what had been going on, she smiled knowingly. "Sounds like karma came late but hit hard," she said. "What do you need from me, Ethan? I want to make sure there's no confusion left ever again. Can we rezone this section as private agricultural use? Make the boundary permanent?" She tapped her pen against her desk. "You'd be cutting off all public and association access through that road. That's the point." A week later, the paperwork was done. The Coal Ranch Access Road was officially reclassified as private agricultural land, with no shared rights or public entry allowed. Legally, it was as closed as Fort Knox, and the HOA couldn't do a damn thing about it. The following Friday, I was out by the fence line when I saw Karen's SUV pull up. Dust swirled around her tires like a storm cloud. She stepped out. No clipboard this time, no entourage. Just her, the sun, and a face lined with weeks of stress. "Mr. Cole," she called, her voice strained. I leaned against my truck. "Karen!" She took a deep breath, folding her arms tightly. "I suppose you're proud of yourself?" I didn't answer. "You humiliated me," she said, her tone trembling. "You made me look like a fool in front of the entire neighborhood." I set my gloves on the hood. "Karen, you did that all on your own." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand what this means. Without access to that road, our community can't qualify for county maintenance subsidies. Our insurance premiums are going up. The board's collapsing." "I warned you," I said quietly. "You picked this fight." For the first time since I'd met her, her eyes flickered with something almost human, exhaustion, maybe even regret. Then she whispered, "You've destroyed everything we built." I stepped forward, closing the space between us. "No, Karen. You destroyed it the day you decided other people's property was yours to control." She looked like she might say more, but then her phone buzzed. She stared down at the screen, face pale. Without another word, she turned and got back in her SUV. As she drove off, I saw a "for sale" sign leaning against her passenger seat. The Queen of Maple Ridge was stepping down. Within a month, the HOA was dissolved. The residents voted it out in a special session, 62-5. The neighborhood was left without leadership, without dues, without Karen. For the first time in years, Maple Ridge was just a place to live. People waved when they passed me now. Kids biked down the street without their parents getting warning letters about noise violations. Even Patrick from that email stopped by one afternoon with a case of beer and a thank you. "Guess we owe you one," he said with a grin. I smiled. "Just take care of the road," he laughed. "It's yours, remember?" "Yeah," I said, glancing down the sunlit gravel stretch. "But it's part of all our history now." We cracked open the beers and sat on the tailgate, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. That night I walked the road one last time. The gravel crunched beneath my boots, the air thick with the scent of cedar and summer. At the far end, I stopped beside the rusted iron stake my father had driven into the ground 60 years ago. I knelt, brushed the dirt away, and whispered, You were right, Dad. Never sell what's yours. The cicadas sang back like applause. When I turned toward home, the porch lights of Maple Ridge flickered in the distance, smaller now, humbled, quiet. And for the first time since this all began, I smiled without bitterness, because the land, our land, remembered the truth long before the paperwork did. And in the end, the road led back to where it always belonged. Home.